Welcome back to Jamie All Over. Today I'm joined by Erin Green, and I reached out to Erin while I was in the middle of my research for a previous guest, Diane Sherman, who had a near death experience. And I researched 20 plus hours of people who had near death experiences because once I got into it, it was just so fascinating. And the more I learned, the more questions I had. Out of all of the ones that I listened to, Erin's story answered the most questions. So I feel like it's a natural progression, maybe almost a quantum leap to go from Diane's very gentle NDE to Erin's, which is so descriptive. But welcome to the show, Erin. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on when me as a random stranger just reached out to you.
Well, of course. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about my experience.
I'm so excited because your story just fascinates me. And out of all the NDEs, like I said, yours to me answers a lot of the questions. And it also brings in new insight as far as the pre-birth
Right.
period, right? And it's so interesting that you spoke about picking out what you were going to look like, how smart you would be, your family, you had to agree to certain broken bones that were going to happen to you. So I want to get into all of that. Well, before we get into your experience, can you give the listeners just a little background about who you are, where you live, what you do, all of that?
Sure. So my name's Aaron Green. I live in Chesapeake, Virginia. I work as an electrical engineer at Newport News Shipbuilding. That's the company that makes all of America's aircraft carriers and half of the submarines for the U.S. Navy. I'm married with 3 kids and a dog. Two of my kids are in college and one of them's still at home. He's in high school. And I'm into history. And I was born in Durham, North Carolina. And when I was 2, we moved to Chesapeake, Virginia. And I've mostly lived in this area for the last 47 years.
Virginia is a beautiful state. I live in Orange County, California now. Before this, I was in LA, but I grew up on the East Coast, born in New Jersey, moved
Okay.
to New York City for a bit. And of course, being from the Northeast, you always make that winter pilgrimage down to Florida.
Yep.
So we always pass through Virginia. And it was so funny. I was just thinking the other day, because I'm really getting into history. And I remember going to Colonial Williamsburg
Okay.
as a
Yeah.
child. And I was like, I should go back there now because I was so bored as a kid. But now I'm
Right.
like, it
Right.
might be really cool to see it as an adult.
Yeah. It's a great place to visit. And there's Jamestown and Yorktown close by. There's a lot of good history. Colonial Williamsburg is very nice. I think it was John D. Rockefeller's son. He spent all of his father's money fixing up Colonial Williamsburg. That's
Oh,
why
did
it's so
he?
nice. Yeah.
Okay, great. Because I have a little grudge with Rockefeller lately. I've been hearing that he's the one that kind of changed the whole school system to not to get too deep on a tangent, but he started the Board of Ed and
Oh, okay.
he said, I need more workers. So we need to create a school system that pumps out workers and not people who are entrepreneurs or business owners. But anyway, that's a whole other episode that we don't need to.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that now. So you are an engineer, an electrical engineer. So I've had many jobs, and one of them was for an engineering company. It was called Instrumentation Engineering, and we used to do schematics for the military. So I wonder
Okay.
maybe there's a little overlap with what you do with what I did.
Yeah. I'm an instrumentation engineer. So that's
Oh,
the kind of stuff I do.
awesome. Awesome. That is so cool. Well, let's get into your ND.
Well, I'll just start from the beginning, I guess. So shortly before my 6th birthday, I was playing with some friends of mine and my brother in the neighbor's backyard. There was maybe about 6 of us. And something happened. I still don't know what happened, but I developed a breathing difficulty. No matter what I did, I couldn't take a breath of air. And I became very upset and I was trying to breathe and I didn't know what to do. So I just tried to start walking home. And I got maybe 20 feet away from my friends and something happened. I didn't pass out or faint, but my consciousness, my soul, the essence of who I really am, left my body. And I watched as my body fell to the ground. And I just kind of floated there. And it was obvious immediately that who I am, but the fundamental essence of what I am is not this physical body. That was just self-evident immediately. And a couple of things happened very quickly. One was my life, that full 6 years of life it flashed in front of me like very, very quickly, down to every little detail replayed itself. And the amazing part was that not only did I re-experience my own feelings and thoughts and what I had been through, but I got to literally feel what my parents had been through. I could feel how my actions as a child had affected them and how, at times being a little kid with dirty diapers and crying, how it frustrated my father. I could literally feel his frustration. I could feel my mother's love for me. And it was amazing. But when it was over, it felt like my life was very short. Like I hadn't really done that much, because I was just a kid. And then very quickly after that, I noticed a bright light in the distance. It was kind of like a bright pinpoint of light, but it looked kind of like a star, but there was an importance to it that I didn't understand, but I instinctively knew that this was something very important, but I didn't continue to focus on that. I went back to just kind of roaming around my yard, and I would start to have questions. And as I would have questions, these answers would come to me. It was like I was waking up to this bigger reality, and I was starting to realize stuff that had happened previously. And so these memories would come back to me and they would play with like perfect detail of something had been through previously. And so the first question I had was, what am I? And it was like I could see myself. And in that time, in that place, I was just kind of like a round orb of consciousness, was a ball of dim light that was floating around right there next to my body. And I had another question. I wanted to know, oh, okay, well, where did I come from? And this memory replayed something I had experienced previously, but had forgotten as I was living life as Aaron. And this started, I had been an orb of light, and I existed with hundreds or thousands of other orbs of light, and we were all together in what I would call a sea of light. We were all happy, we were safe, we were content. Everything was fine. There was no problems, and there could never be any problems. And periodically, we would receive some kind of gift that would come down, and everyone would get one of these gifts. As a kid, I thought it was kind of like getting a cookie. And anyway, one time there was one fewer of these gifts than there were souls in this group. And I made the conscious decision that I was going to give up, my treat, what I wanted, so that everyone else around me could get theirs. I knew that they were just like me. And I thought, well, they're going to want this too. So I'm going to let them have it. And when the last treat came to the last soul, I was very, very gently lifted up out of that group. And the care with which I was lifted was really noticeable. I was delicately lifted, and I could feel the carefulness with which I was pulled out of that group. And
Oh, wow.
I was contacted like mind to mind kind of communication. And essentially, it was a much more powerful being that was contacting me. And this being said that it was my creator, and that it had made me, and it had made all the other souls, and that I was very much loved and cherished, and I was very important, and not just me, but everyone else also.
So when you're in this sea of souls and you feel like you know everyone else, the other souls that you're around, do they
Right.
feel like friends? Do they feel like family? And how long do you feel like you were there?
Uh, like close friends, and I couldn't answer that how long I was there. It was like in that realm outside of this physical body, it's like time doesn't work the same way. It
Right.
doesn't feel the same. And so I couldn't really put a time to how long I was there.
Would
Um,
you say that you were a new soul there?
right.
Is that where the baby souls go? Like everyone there had not been to Earth or another
Right.
planet or anything yet.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I view it. This is like baby souls. Like this is where we were first created, and this is where we started from. That's how I view this.
And was the amount of them infinite, or could you kind of tell the quantity of them?
Right. Well, it was like it was a group of maybe a couple hundred or a couple thousand. And I feel like there was lots of other groups that I wasn't aware of, but my particular group was only maybe a couple thousand at the most.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And then when you say you were given a gift or a treat, there's I guess there's no eating in that realm, so it's
Right.
not like an actual cookie here on Earth
That's
that a
right.
kid would get
That's
as a
right.
treat. So was it just something like, "Oh, it's here's a touch of extra happiness," or
Yeah,
what was
that's
it?
exactly what it felt like. Yeah. And I
Okay.
don't understand what it was, but somehow it gave us a little bit of a boost of temporary happiness.
And when this happened and you chose to forego it for the sake of others, was this the first time you were offered that treat, or were you offered it before and accepted it?
No, I was offered it before and accepted it. Yeah.
Okay.
But this
Okay.
was the first time that there weren't enough for everybody.
Okay. Now, what I heard you say in another interview is that that set off a ripple effect where after souls saw you do it, maybe like a group of 7 after you did that
Right.
as well. Now, were they able to see you get lit? Do you think they were able to see you get lifted out and that's why they then wanted to have that same experience? And did they realize you were now gone from that sea? Or were they just like, oh, if he did it, maybe I should do it? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Yeah, I think it was the last one. Like they saw what I did and they knew why I did it, and they decided that they were going to do the same thing. I don't know other than that if they understood what I was going through, but basically they saw what I did and they recognized that, hey, that's a good thing to give up what you want to help those around you. And they kind of like copied that.
Now, did you see any souls do that before? And did you see this whole thing of souls being gently lifted up out of your group?
I saw the maybe 7 souls after me get lifted up. But after that, my understanding is, or at the time, I thought they would all eventually get lifted up out of that group.
So I wonder if that's an experience that we've all been through as a baby soul, and then eventually when we finally do a selfless act like that, that's when we get to move on to the next
Yeah,
experience.
that's my understanding is that in order to indicate that you're ready to go through this process we're all in the middle of, you need to give up something of yourself to help others. And I think that was the core of that decision I made to give up what I wanted for those around me. I think that was an indication to God that, hey, okay, this soul is now ready to begin this process. That's kind of how I interpreted the whole thing.
Okay. And you then, and we'll get to the continuation of your story, but one last thing. You had said to the creator, why, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but, paraphrasing, why are we being tested? And if you want us to just think this way or feel this way, or even with the sense of going to earth and having these experiences, you said something to the effect of like, why don't you just make us this way
Right.
so we don't even have to go through those things? What was the response there?
Yeah, just like you said, I asked, hey, why would I need to go through this difficult process? Couldn't you just change me and make me mature and however I need to be? And God's response was, yes, absolutely. God was capable of changing us however he would want to, but that we were created to be beings with free will. We were created to be able to think for ourselves and make our own decisions. And that was like a cornerstone of why we were ever created in the first place. And that for God to change us forcefully would violate that cornerstone of our creation and would kind of like it wouldn't make sense. And so God was very respectful of our free will and our right to make our own decisions. And God wasn't going to interfere with that, even though that meant that we would have to go through some more frustrations to reach our full potential. But for God, it was like completely worth it. Like that was very important that we have the freedom to do what we want to do. And God was going to respect that no matter how difficult it it ended up making life for everybody. But those difficulties were going to be short lived. And God was absolutely confident that, hey, this is a good plan. You're going to go through this difficult but very, very brief process. And then you're going to be able to enjoy your existence without having to go through any kind of difficulties again. And it's going to be completely worth it. And it's going to be worthwhile. And you're going to be very happy when you're finished with this.
The concept of free will comes up in probably every NDE that I've listened to. That's a big thing. And someone said that once we rejoin the creator with all of these souls that I guess have ascended and have their experiences, we no longer have free will because we're all one. And so we want what the creator wants. We just want like goodness. So at that point, we don't have the free will. Was that your understanding too?
I don't view it that way. I view it that we still have free will, but we freely go along with what God wants. Like we're in tune. We have the same thought process of kindness, love, honesty, compassion, and so we're in tune with God, and we're in agreement with God's decisions. So it's not like we don't have free will at that point. It's more like our free will has now aligned with God's will, and we can be in unison because we're all in agreement. That's kind of how I see it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so now you are gently being removed from this sea of souls. You meet your creator. What is that creator, God, whatever you call it? What does that energy feel like?
Yeah, so that's just amazing. Like that is, I think, the highest level of happiness a soul could ever reach with just to be with God. Um, God is loving, kind, compassionate, honest, gentle, caring, respectful, every positive trait you could think of. Like that is God. That is who God is. And to be in that presence of this all powerful, all loving entity is just amazing and is an extremely pleasant experience.
Is there a visual or is it just an energy or what is it?
Yeah, so I was given an opportunity to see what I was told was the face of God during this experience. Essentially, what I saw was a huge sun-like entity and extremely bright, extremely powerful. And it was like this entity was made up of trillions and trillions of small orbs or souls, each one with their own faint light, but together in unison, it was extremely bright and powerful. So it was like what I saw God as was trillions and trillions of souls all put together and merged as one in like a happy unison.
So it's not a face that as humans, what that face looks like. It's not
Well,
that.
yeah, what I saw was the sun-like entity with countless faces that looked kind of like our face. And a couple of these faces came to the surface and they wished me well, welcomed me into existence. And their face looked kind of similar to ours. So to me, the face of God is like a sun with trillions and trillions of faces, and each one having their own independent personality and free will, but simultaneously they're like all merged as one in a happy entity. And I mean, that's how I saw it. I know there's some other religions that have a visual that has a similar idea where it's a whole bunch of souls kind of merged together.
Okay. I'm going to ask you probably the hardest question I have for you right now,
Okay.
which I was going to save till the end, but we're on the topic of it now. How, I don't even know how to ask the question because it's such a big question, but God, the creator, he created all of us or we're a part of that. How did God get created?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't have an answer for that. I think it's like God always existed. There was no beginning, but I don't understand it. I don't have an answer for that question, but it's a great question.
Do you think we'll know when we get there?
Yeah, I think there's a perfect answer for that that God has that he'll readily tell us when it's time, but I don't have an answer to that.
Okay. I mean, maybe obviously there's some things we can't comprehend, and that's probably one of them.
Right.
I'm going to let you now continue on with the rest of your story. So now you are now with
Okay.
the creator. So go ahead and I will try
Sure.
not to interrupt you again.
Oh, no
No
problem.
no promises though.
All right. So I was lifted up out of this group, and essentially, the way God explained it to me was we were new souls. We were ignorant. We had no experience. We were brand new. And God was loving, compassionate, kind, honest, caring, all these positive traits. And that in order for us to fully appreciate our existence, we would need to, of our own free will, adopt those same kind of traits. We would need to become loving, kind, compassionate, honest, have self control, all these different traits. We would need to freely choose them for ourselves. And when we had, we would then be able to transition on to a much more loving, a much happier form of existence. And not only that, but the hardships that we were going to go through, the difficulties we would face would prepare us to enjoy that wonderful existence on a more complete level. And it would lead to a much more happy existence when we were ready. And so that's what I was told. And so I guess it made sense to me. And God asked me, are you willing to go through this journey? It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be very brief and it's completely worth it. Like you're going to agree that it's worth it when you're done with this experience. And I agreed, and God was very pleased with me. And then it's like I was shot very quickly, like I was leaving that realm or that place and very quickly moving somewhere else. And I still had mind to mind communication with God. There was still a communication there. And we basically looked at thousands and thousands of different planets I could go to. And we saw that there was all sorts of different beings I could become. And it was up to me to choose one. What, which one would I want to go to?
Okay,
And
so
when we
I'm stopping you again.
okay, sure.
Obviously, I mean, I just saw a video the other day. It was someone estimating how many planets there actually are in our
Right.
universe, and our universe just keeps expanding and expanding. And there could be millions, billions of other planets, right?
Right.
So obviously it makes sense that there must be life on
Yeah,
others.
obviously, I agree. Yeah.
So first of all, that seems like such a vast undertaking for you to be able to, look through all of those options. How
Right.
was that even possible? One, and then two, did every planet that you could potentially go to, their beings all looked different?
All right. So the first question, or first statement, I don't think I looked at all the planets at all. Probably thousands, but not all of them. And then what did the beings look like? I don't know. I don't have that memory. I have the impression that they're very similar to us, where there's some kind of physical being and there's a soul that incarnates that physical being. And they're going through some sort of experiences, kind of like ours, where they are learning these same traits that they need to learn, which is love, kindness, compassion, and honesty, all these good traits that they're in the same kind of development process where they're learning those same traits. And it just so happened that for me, for some reason, the earth felt like the perfect fit. It was where I wanted to go. And somehow I was absolutely sure that this was where I wanted to be.
Some people have said Earth is the hardest. Did you get that sense?
I definitely got the impression that the earth was, I wouldn't, my understanding is I wouldn't necessarily say it's the hardest planet in the entire universe, but I would definitely say it seems like it's the hardest class of planet in the entire universe. Like we're at some kind of level that's very difficult, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was other planets at that same level of difficulty, but I don't know. That's just my impression from what I saw.
Okay. So you chose Earth, and then what?
Okay. So with that, my question was answered. It showed where I had come from and why I was on Earth. And so with that question was answered, then I was back floating in my backyard, wandering around aimlessly near my body that was just laying on the ground. And so then I had another question. My question was, okay, why am I Aaron? Why am I this person? Why am I living this life? What's going on? And so again, memory replayed something I'd been through previously, but I'd forgotten. So in the first memory, it was clear I was like a new soul. I'd never been through anything. But the second memory, it was clear that I was a much more experienced soul. Like I had been around the block, so to speak. It was clear that this was not my first life, that I had been through a lot before this. Um,
Oh, okay.
and so I had been, I get the impression that I had screwed up a previous life. I don't know the details, but I was unhappy. I was frustrated with myself. Like I had made mistakes and I was with some guides and the guides were trying to help me to get my thinking straightened out to get back to where I needed to be. And they wanted me to come back to Earth. They said, we want to send you back to Earth. And basically I was like, no, I'm not going back there. And you can't make me go back there. I was very concerned that I would screw up again, basically. And the guide said, well, you're right. We can't make you, but here's some souls that you'll help if you go back. And so they showed me that if I went back, I would be able to help some other souls. And with that, I thought, okay, maybe I'll consider it. Maybe we can look at the possibilities. And so they showed me a life that I could lead. And this was their plan that I would become this person. And the person was angry, like they were dominated by anger. I think they had like a very difficult childhood. Like that's the kind of life I would have. But that working against that anger, that person's natural inclination to anger, like as a soul, I would have to constantly be working against that. And that would benefit me as a soul because it would make me more peaceful. I don't know, somehow it would grow my soul to be constantly working against that physical urge for anger. But I rejected it. I said, no, there's no way. I'm not doing that. I
Do
just
you
went.
do you think that's an experience though you're gonna have at some point? Or do we not need to experience everything in order to get back to God?
Right. Well, I think through multiple iterations of this, we get all the experiences we need. And if we're not getting some specific experience this time, we can get it the next time. And it's like there's a lot of different ways that we can learn all these traits, kindness, compassion, honesty, etc. And there's not just one way that you need to go through or experience all this. There's a whole lot of different ways that we can learn what we need to learn.
Right. Okay. So you saw this angry person and you were like, I don't want that life,
Right.
but you're able to learn kindness or patience or whatever the lesson was from that anger. You're able to learn it perhaps in this life as who.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and probably there's some specific benefit of that life for my soul that I'm passing up, but there's other benefits of this life that I'm gaining. So it's not like I'm necessarily losing something. It's just a different experience. So there'll be different benefits to me for going through this particular experience and
Okay.
benefits to other people as well. But after I rejected that life, the guides kind of were like, okay, well, let's look at some other possibilities. And so we looked at some other parents, and I saw that these other parents, it would be possible that they could have a redheaded child. And I thought, okay, a redheaded girl, that's what I want to be. And I wanted to be a girl because I felt like females were less violent. And I think maybe in a previous life I had been violent. I don't know, but I felt like I would be less likely to hurt anyone else if I was a girl. And then the red hair, it was obvious that red hair is kind of rare. And I really liked that. I thought that was really neat to have a rare, unusual hair color that really appealed to me and my personality. But there was something about the kind of body and my soul and somehow the personality, there was like a mismatch. And I would have been kind of like an awkward person, and I would have had difficulty dating or being friends with other people. I would have been kind of lonely. And so that was a deal breaker for me. Even though I wanted to be a redheaded girl, I wanted friendship and a spouse more. So I passed on that. And we started looking at some other options. We looked at redheaded boys, but somehow the genetics, there was fewer options for that than there were for girls. And it just didn't seem like it would work out. So we started looking at brown haired boys. And these parents had all kinds of genes available for brown haired boys. There was all sorts of options. And so I thought, okay, I guess maybe this could work. It,
Well, Aaron, I'm looking at you now and it looks like you have red hair.
oh, that's probably just the light here.
It's the
No, I
lighting.
don't
Oh,
have
okay.
red hair.
So you came into this life and you have brown hair because
Yeah.
I can't tell in the video. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
And
Go
I used to have more of it too, but I
ahead.
am getting older. Uh, and yeah, some of it's kind of gray now also. But anyway, so I wanted to be like really good looking, like the best looking guy on the planet. You know what I mean? Like a top model kind of look. That's what I wanted.
It's
And
interesting that you knew the benefits and you knew that that was something that you wanted.
oh
So you
yeah,
knew there was value to that on Earth.
yeah, it was just intuitively obvious. Like it was well understood that the way you looked, your physical attributes, those totally affect the kind of experience you're going to have in life. That was well understood by me and the guides. It was no mystery at all. And
How do you
so,
feel about that? Because I mean, here as a human on Earth, I kind of hate that. I'm just
right,
like, that's
right.
not right. Like, let's judge people on what's on the inside,
Yeah.
and we don't do that here for the
Oh,
most
yeah,
part.
absolutely. And that is very well understood at the spiritual level that you're going to have a very different experience based on how you look and what kind of body you have. All that is well known and taken into consideration when planning out a life. And
Wow.
so I wanted to be really good looking, but my guides, they basically said, hey, yeah, that's an option that's available to you and you could choose that, but here are the downsides. And they showed me that at my level of progress, if I was really good looking, women would treat me differently. And there were certain opportunities available to a really, really good looking guy that aren't available to a more average guy. And I was basically shown that I wouldn't be able to resist certain temptations and I would essentially be too promiscuous. And there is a spiritual downside to that that was self evident. And I
Well,
didn't want that.
what's the spiritual downside to that?
I think like when you leave this life, if you haven't been able to exercise some level of self control on that side, it prevents you from moving to higher realms. It prevents you from greater happiness.
Okay.
Like the self control of not giving into our human impulses, there's a spiritual benefit to that. And if you're not able to maintain that self control, you can just reduce your attractiveness and it kind of has the same effect.
Okay.
Um, so basically, there was too many downsides for me personally of being really, really good looking. It wouldn't work for me for what I was looking for in life. And the guides knew it and they said, hey, look, how about something a little less attractive? So we lowered the attractiveness down to, a little bit attractive. I know I'm getting kind of old, so maybe I'm not that good looking. But as a younger man, I was okay.
But that's so funny that up there, wherever it is, it's like, okay, well, we're going to bring you down a couple notches so you have a
Right.
different experience. But obviously, there's people of all varying levels.
Yeah.
And again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
Yeah.
also. But I guess there's a general idea. And some people, you get movie stars and models, obviously they chose
Right.
to be the pinnacle of that. But I wonder if their experience is different than what yours would have been. Like, were they saying you as Aaron, if you were this attractive, then you personally would not
Right.
have this control, but someone else who may choose to have that level of attractiveness, they might have a different experience and they can have control?
Yeah. What my guidance told me was specifically for me. But I think the same kind of concept would apply to others. And some people who have chosen to be, very good looking, I think they make some choices that spiritually aren't the best and could prevent them from greater levels of happiness when they leave this life.
Okay. Okay. There's a lot of men in LA that are not going to be happy to hear that, but I'm glad you're saying it.
Right. Again, there's a downside to just being completely promiscuous and living like that. Spiritually, there's a downside to that.
Even
That was
even here, I think there's a downside
yeah,
to it. And obviously, to each his own. We're not here to judge
right.
others,
Yeah, that's
but
not what I'm saying. Yeah,
yeah, I, just to make that clear, neither of us are saying that. But I think we realize the downside to that. It's like you're chasing after something that only makes you feel worse, kind of in the end,
yeah,
if there's nothing of substance to it or
yeah.
actual connection.
Are you familiar with Dan Brazilian? He's a famous rich guy and good
Oh,
looking.
Dan now I can't.
Okay.
Bilzerian.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Anyway.
He dated my friend who I had on the podcast,
Oh,
Lindsay.
okay. Okay.
But yes,
Well,
go ahead and say she'll agree with what I think you're about to say.
he's living the life that a lot of men think they want to live. And he's got lots of beautiful women around him and he's doing what he wants to do. But I read an interview where he said that at one point, even though he was with all kinds of beautiful women all the time, he was miserable. It was not giving him the kind of happiness that people think it would.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting to hear that from someone who was living that kind of life, that, hey, it didn't make him happy.
Yep.
I think that's interesting. There's something to be learned there.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. So anyway, I picked my level of attractiveness, and then we moved on, and I started looking at the level of intelligence. And I wanted to be like the smartest guy on the planet. It was the same kind of deal. I wanted to be really, really smart, like Albert Einstein or even smarter. And that was available to these parents. I could have been ridiculously smart like that. But again, my guide said, hey, wait a second, look at these downsides. And they showed me that I would be arrogant. I would look down on other people. Other people would really irritate and frustrate me because they're not as smart as me. And I would end up being an atheist, and I would be kind of self-reliant, and I wouldn't be able to work well with other people, and that would be a huge spiritual downside. And I agreed. It was obvious that was not what I wanted. So just like with looks, we backed down the intelligence level to, somebody's smart, but nothing ridiculous, right? I'm not setting any records or anything.
When you were deciding this, did you know of Albert Einstein, or are you just saying that now so I relate
Okay.
to the level? But did
I'm
you
just
know?
saying that to so you can relate to what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
That his name didn't come up during this planning. It's just to kind of tell you what kind of intelligence we were talking about.
So when he made his choices, he's like, I want to be the smartest. But they were like, okay, well, we should probably give you some crazy hair so that you're not, too arrogant.
Right. And again, this is just me personally. Like other souls, they're going through their own mission, or they're trying to accomplish something, or maybe they just say, hey, screw it. I want to be just really intelligent anyway. And there's all sorts of different reasons why other souls might make that choice. But for me personally, it wasn't the kind of life I wanted to live. And it wasn't, being ridiculously intelligent and wouldn't give me the growth or the kind of change that I was looking for spiritually.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it was made known to you that if you were that level of intelligence, you would be atheist.
Right. And that, again, that was me personally. But yeah, that was what I was shown, that somehow I would think I knew everything, think I had it all figured out, and that it would elude me that, yeah, God exists.
Yeah. One of my smartest friends is an atheist. And
Okay.
I may have heard somewhere that Elon Musk is, but now he's kind of coming around a little bit
Okay.
and saying things like, well, the principles of what people have learned from Jesus, they ultimately make a better society. Like I've heard him in interviews lately, he's coming around a bit. And it's not for everyone who chooses that level of
Right.
intelligence, like you said. It's very individual, but I
Yes.
think there is something to be said with those who are atheists and their intelligence level?
Right. So, we picked the level of attractiveness, intelligence that I would have. We looked at all the other physical attributes of this body. I knew exactly what I was getting into physically. And the guides showed me that, okay, with these genes you're picking, there's an unintended side effect here. You're going to have really horrible acne as a teenager. And I did. As a teenager, I had really horrible acne. And the guides were like, if you make this choice for this body, here's what you're going to have to go through. You're going to have terrible acne. And so we looked at what that would be like. And it seemed to me that it would be so brief, like from a spiritual level, to look at what 2 years of difficulty would be like. It seemed like it was almost nothing. It's hard to really stress enough how short 2 years look like from that spiritual level. And then I also saw that, well, it would actually help me. Like it would make me a better person. I would be able to look beyond skin deep issues a little better. And it would help with my spiritual growth to go through that. Like somehow it would actually help me, even though it wasn't really what was planned. And so I agreed, okay, I'll go through that. It's okay. So I accepted that acne as a teenager, which was, I'll tell you, it was difficult to go through that, but I accepted it and I remember doing it now. Then after we had the physical attributes figured out, the guide started looking at other stuff. They showed me a number of things that I had done in previous lives and how that would now impact this life. And there was lots of things that they showed me, and a lot of it I'm not proud of. They showed me mistakes that I made. It seems like in the course of becoming where I am now, I'm a nice guy. I try to help people. I'm a decent person today in 2024. But hey, in previous lifetimes, I've made mistakes. It was very clear, and they showed me lots of these different mistakes. It seems like I've made every mistake possible to mankind at one point or another. Like I've screwed up everything. But anyway, they showed me specific examples. Okay, you did this in a previous life, and it's kind of like you wrote a check in a previous life, and now it's time to cash that check. Or I'm an engineer. It was kind of like it was a one side of an equation in a previous life, and now I had to balance out that equation in this life, or you could call it karma if you want. But it was clear that what I had done in previous lives was now going to affect this life. But it wasn't all bad. Like some of this stuff was good. Some of the stuff I had done was definitely good stuff as well. But the clearest example I had, like this is very clear and straightforward. In a previous life, I had been kind of a strong guy. I had been big, muscular, and I had gotten in a fight with a much smaller guy, and I really beat him up pretty bad. Okay. And at the time during that life, I felt like I was justified and he deserved it. And I was happy that I had beat him up. But watching that scene again with my guides, it was clear that I had gone too far. He didn't deserve that. I could have easily avoided the fight. It was unnecessary. And what I had did now it felt like a mistake. But
So
my
you were
guides,
watching it from a third person point of view,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you
it's
could
like
feel
we
what the
watched
other
that.
guy felt.
Yeah. It's like we replayed that particular scene and I could feel how that guy felt, how I had made him feel, and also feel that it was totally unnecessary and I could have avoided it. And now my guide showed me that it was planned that it was my turn to receive exactly what I had given out. And this isn't a punishment. This was so that I could learn, so that I could become a better soul, a more compassionate soul, someone who would avoid unnecessary fights, that sort of thing. And they showed me that the plan was as a teenager, I would have my nose broken. Basically, I would get in a fight and have my nose broken. But in order to go through that, I needed to agree to it. But I agreed to it because going through that would kind of like eliminate this baggage I was carrying around that was preventing me from moving to higher levels of happiness in the spiritual realms. It would kind of like liberate me from that bad karma and
Yeah.
allow me to move to higher levels of happiness. So I agreed to it. And there showed me a number of other things like that, where something I had done in a previous life, now it was going to play into different things I would experience in this life. And they showed me friendships I would have. And one thing I think I felt like I should share with you, they showed me that there was a friend I had had in a previous life. Okay. We were very close. We were friends. We both lived and then died. And in the spiritual realm, this person, he had been amazed to learn that animals have a spiritual path just like humans do. Okay. And he was really amazed to learn that. And he wanted to focus a future life on helping animals. Okay.
Mhm.
That was the focus he wanted for his next life. Okay. And he had been a friend in a previous life, but in this life, we were going to be coworkers, but we weren't going to be friends. He was going to irritate me and I was going to irritate him. And that was like all planned out. And somehow that would benefit both of us because we would have to overcome that frustration we would have with each other and work together and still do the work that was needed and not fight or argue or whatnot. And so,
Well,
and we,
can I stop you again?
oh
Because there's so
yeah,
much to unpack there.
okay,
Okay. So I'm going to shelf the animal thing for a minute because that's a big conversation that I'm very interested in. As you probably have guessed, if you've seen
right,
my
right,
Instagram, I'm an animal activist, I'm vegan. So definitely want to talk about that. And I thank you for bringing that up. But these contracts I find so interesting that we can make with others. Like,
right,
I'm going to annoy you so that you can have growth. Do you agree to this? Yes, I'm going to do this to you. And, it's almost comforting in a way when, let's say, bad things happen to us.
right,
Just kind of knowing, like, one, we probably chose this for our own growth. So it can get people out of that headspace of like, oh, poor me. Why do bad things just always happen to me?
right,
No, you can kind of take your power back and be like, no, you chose that for your own growth. One. But then two, what's so fascinating is like, let's take the worst example. Let's say a murderer, right? He kills someone.
right,
There's, from what I'm hearing, it kind of sounds like maybe in the next life, those roles might be reversed because that
right.
killer now
Could
has
be.
to experience being killed and what he did to or he or she did to someone else.
Right. Yeah, I think there's stuff like that going on all the time that I saw little pieces of it, nothing quite that bad, but I definitely saw that there's agreements of different sorts that are being made and people are agreeing to be enemies or go through all kinds of crazy stuff. And remember, the core reason here is going through some of these crazy experiences or difficulties. They can really help you grow as a person or as a soul and become better and more kind, compassionate, and loving. And God has worked this all together and intertwines all these different lives in such a way that we end up benefiting each other. And
Yeah.
it
And
was interesting to see some little pieces of that for myself.
yeah, and I even heard other people say it was their mother, their own mother, like the two of them just like, let's say you
Right,
don't get along with a parent, that was on purpose. You both agreed to do that. And then I've
right,
also heard things where like, you can come back and the mother is now the child and just you switch
right.
roles, like
Yeah.
mind blowing. Okay. So we'll talk about the animals kind of towards the end. I
Okay.
want you to be able to get through this
Sure.
story as
Sure.
best as possible.
So I saw the relationship I would have with that guy. There was other agreements being made, all kinds of stuff. And I agreed to play a certain role in another person's life. And there was a time where I would need certain help and someone else would provide that. But all of
Oh,
the
wait,
stuff,
I'm sorry. I did have one last question about that. So do you actually know this person in your life right now?
well, they've actually passed away.
Oh,
This
but you
person
did know.
died maybe 4 years ago.
Oh, I'm
Yes, but
sorry.
I knew them in life. And I hadn't put it all together about who this person was and the agreement we had until after he passed away. But now I understand. Now it fits perfectly. Now I understand and I get it. I,
Wow.
I
Okay.
think if I knew that during our relationship, it would have affected the way I felt about him, and I wouldn't have been able to have that same
Yeah.
experience where I'm like, this guy really irritates me, but I want to be nice to him. I want to have a good working relationship, and I would have to exert that extra effort so that we could have a positive working relationship. And he felt the same way. I irritated him, so it was kind of a mutual thing. It was
Yeah.
a mutual irritation and yet a mutual spiritual benefit.
Yeah.
I saw other relationships that were planned out. And one thing I think is interesting is there was some specific times in my life where the plan was for me to make a big change or I needed to make a big move in my life. And there was times where that move was planned out with someone from that initial group I had been with I think it's called the Soul Group. So that initial group of 2000 that or whatever it was that
Uh-huh.
I'd started out with, like we have a close spiritual connection and that the gods will actually use that in your life. They'll take someone that's a member of your soul group and they might play an important role in your life or some critical pivot point. They might play a role that somehow nudges you to move in the intended direction. And I
Yeah. And
saw,
Would you say that's when you also have the feeling like, I know
Yeah.
this person feels familiar, but you've only just met them?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like you will feel a connection with them, even though they're a complete stranger. And I experienced that a couple of times in my life, and I didn't understand it at the time, but here later, I'm able to piece it together and understand, oh, that was that person that I had planned this thing with in the before life, you know?
No, it's so true. If we just look back on our lives and you think of where you are right now and all the decisions that led up and just chance things, maybe such random things like if I decide to go to a concert tonight, I'm going to meet the love of my life. But earlier that night, I was too tired. I didn't want to go. But then my friend nudged me to go and I went.
Right.
And it's like stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like that, a lot of that stuff that feels like chance, but it's actually planned out ahead of time. And then the guides, they nudge us in one direction or another and help make sure that it happens.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, did you choose your kids? Does it get that detailed?
I don't think I chose my kids, but I did choose my parents. It was clear that I was able to pick them, and I knew exactly what kind of people they were, what kind of parents they would be. That was all self-evident to me.
It would make sense because I was a terrible teenager. It makes sense they didn't pick me, but I picked them because if
Right.
given the choice, maybe they wouldn't have picked me.
Right. My guess is that's usually how it works, but I don't know. I just know my
Yeah.
answer. And then also there's sometimes where two souls they have an agreement ahead of time, or maybe they agree to be like parent and child to let some kind of specific events play out that benefit them and give them the kind of growth they need.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went on. We planned out all these details about my life, and it was clear that I agreed to lots of hardships. That I agreed to lots of relationships with other people, and I played a direct role in all kinds of different ways in making this life and agreeing to the kind of events that I'm going through in this lifetime. Anyway, when we had made all those decisions, my guides asked me again. We took a step back and we looked at all the decisions that had been made, and we looked at this life as a whole. And they said, "Are you sure you're willing to go through this?" And I agreed. I said, "Yes, I'm willing to go through this." And with that, it's like the decision was made, and then it's like, bam, I was off to live this life. And with that, the that memory of how I became Aaron Green that ended, and I was back to floating next to my body. And then I had another question. I wanted to know, well, what happens to souls like after they die? Like, where do they go? How does that work? And I was shown my own experience from times I had died in previous lives, like what I had gone through after I died.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was shown that I've lived bad lives or lives that were not good. I don't know what to say. It was clear that I had been to, at some point, a very horrible place, that all the souls there were miserable, just absolutely miserable. And they were fighting with each other endlessly. And I was fighting as well. And we didn't have any hope for any kind of change or happiness. We didn't know any kind of past. All we knew was fighting with each other and trying to kill and dominate those around us. And it was
Would you
just
say that was
absolutely,
hell?
I think so. Yeah. I think I was in hell at some point in the past.
But you don't have to stay there. It's not for infinity.
That's right. Yeah, that was very clear. I was just in this horrible melee fighting over and over again. And no matter how badly we would wound each other, those wounds, even though they were really painful, they would quickly heal. And we just kept fighting with each other. But eventually I got tired of fighting, or I had some compassion for those around me. I'm not sure what happened, but I had an internal change and I didn't want to fight with anymore. And like as soon as I had that change and I didn't want to fight with those around me anymore, I was lifted up out of that group very quickly by some kind of angel or being of light. And it was clear that there was like angels or beings of light that were monitoring this whole situation the whole time. And all these poor souls that were angry and miserable they just kept fighting. But when one of them would stop fighting, it was time for them to leave. And I was told that when I quit fighting with the other souls, I didn't belong there anymore. Like it's not where I belong because I wasn't trying to fight anymore. And I was told point blank, all of those souls down there, they will all leave when they are ready. None of them are going to be stuck there forever.
Okay.
And it was clear after that, I went on, transitioned on to live some other life. And then I saw that after a different life, I had been in kind of an unhappy place where, not miserable, but just kind of unhappy. And we were all there was me and a bunch of other souls just kind of standing around in darkness. And I think that we had all been atheists in life. I'm not sure, but that's my impression. We just kind of stood around in darkness and we were all unhappy, but not miserable. And there had been someone that I had helped during that previous life that was doing much better spiritually. And they actually came down and they would try to help me or any of the other souls. They wanted to help us, and they had a way for us to get better, which I think was to come reincarnate again, but we had to agree to it. Anyway, eventually I agreed to go with this soul that was there to help me. And when I did, I was able to leave that place, and I think I transitioned into some other life. And I saw some other realm I had been in where it looked just like a street that you would see in like an old town. There was buildings and people there were doing the same kind of thing they had done in life, but now they were in a much happier realm. Everyone there was very happy, but it looked just like a town you might see on Earth, except everything was more perfect and more beautiful. And,
What
and,
was
and
the architecture like? Because and I don't know if this is the realm that I'm referring to now, but I've heard some people say a lot of it is like Greek architecture.
okay, my guess would be that those people had lived a life in Greece in the past.
Okay.
For me, that particular town looked like a medieval European kind of town. Like that's kind
Okay.
of what it looked like, with buildings that looked like that and roads going to the building. And I remember specifically one lamppost that was there. So I'm guessing it was whenever they had candle powered lamps in towns. Like I'm guessing that's the time frame that life would have been from. But that was the mindset that everyone had. And when they died, they had that same kind of mindset and view about this is what things are supposed to be like. And so they made a town that matched what their expectations and what their level of development that they had reached. But I didn't stay in that realm long at all. I left very quickly because I understood that was like kind of like a midway realm, and there was much, much happier realms to go into. So I quickly left that place to transition to yet another life. And one of the places I saw was like a city of light. The buildings, the people, they were all like a bright light and the translucent color. You could see through them, and they were all ridiculously happy. So I saw a number of different levels, and it was pretty clear that we go to some level that matches our own internal thoughts or how much love we have or how much hate we have. We kind of transition to a realm of existence that naturally matches whatever mindset we have. If it's hateful, it's a horrible place. If we're loving, kind people, it's a nice place. It's pretty straightforward like that, but we're not stuck there.
Yeah.
We can transition to another life and we can face whatever challenges are necessary to make ourselves more kind, compassionate, loving, honest, whatever. And that will allow us to then move to higher and higher levels. And this process goes on and on. And eventually you reach the point where you don't have to come back in here anymore. And you can go, as I understand it, transition to more training at a higher, happier level. But it was clear that at some point in the past, I had reached that point where I no longer needed to keep coming back to Earth. But I made the decision to come back and help others. But somewhere along the way, I screwed up big time and I made some kind of mistake. I don't know. Somehow I screwed that up. And so that was pretty clear when we were planning out this life that I had made a mistake somewhere, even though I had reached the point where I didn't need to come back to Earth. Anyway,
Wow.
so after I had seen all these different realms that souls go to after they die, I realized that after this life, I was supposed to be able to transition back to that very happy realm that I talked about, the city of light. And I was really, really happy. I was ready to go. Like I was done with life. I'm ready to go back to this place of extreme happiness. And I remembered that I had friends there. And the level of connection we have with friends in the spiritual connection is extremely close. It's kind of like on Earth, we have like a sexual merger, which is really, hopefully pleasurable. But in the spiritual realm, there's a deeper merger that goes on where souls kind of connect with each other and almost overlap. And that's a very, very pleasurable experience. It's not sexual at all, but it's much more intimate and much more pleasant. And I remembered that ability and that when you have a friend in the spiritual realm, that you can do that. And it's wonderful. And so I wanted to get back to all that. And
Yeah.
I was ready. But just when I had that thought, this angel or being of light, some entity came at me very quickly, and I was able to get a brief glimpse of him. And he was absolutely beautiful. Just really difficult to describe how beautiful he is, but He was like translucent. You could see through him. He had facial features like a person does, but because he's translucent, you can see into his body. And there's like an internal structure there that tells a story. You know, our face tells a story, like how old you are, male,
Yeah.
female, that kind of stuff. Well, on the spiritual plane, when you can look into someone, you can see the internal features, which represent and show what kind of soul they are at a much deeper level. And somehow,
Amazing. I mean,
that,
that's what I just said. If you can only judge people or get to know somebody based on the inside and know their heart and all of that rather than judging them on the outside, that's so cool that
yeah,
that happens.
like that's just natural. That's how it works on the other side, is you do see inside. You do literally, for these higher level beings, you literally do see inside them and see what kind of person they are. And that gives you a much more intimate connection immediately, because you know exactly who each other are, like from the get go. But somehow that was all very, very beautiful. But this being or angel or whatever it was very clear. He said, "You are not to leave your body." It was like I had bent the rules, or I had screwed up, or I had done something maybe I wasn't supposed to do. It was like this breathing problem that I had. It should not have triggered my soul to leave my body. That's the impression I got. And he said, "You're not to leave your body." And it's like, bam, I was back in my body. And I stood up. I didn't have any breathing problem anymore. My brother had noticed that I had fallen down, and he came over to check on me. But as soon as I stood up, he ignored me and went back to play with the friends. And I went home and, I was a little kid. I had a speech impediment. I tried to tell my mom, but there's no way I could explain all this stuff at 6 years old with the speech impediment. I just couldn't begin to describe all this. And so I would think about this experience daily for maybe 6 months. And then I had this mind to mind communication, and it was one of these guides that I had worked with prior to life. And they basically made it clear that they wanted to hide this experience that I had. They basically said it was interfering with my life, and it would prevent me from developing faith. Because I had seen all this stuff and I knew, hey, God is real, I wouldn't be able to develop faith. And that was somehow really important for me personally. And so they wanted to hide the memory. And then also, they wanted to add additional hardships to my life that would prepare me for having all that, uh, having that experience. Like somehow I needed further development to be able to properly process this experience I had had. And so they wanted to add additional hardships to my life, but I had to agree to it, or I needed to agree to it for it to happen. But they explained the benefit, and I knew that they were looking out for my best interest. So I agreed to all these changes that they wanted in my life. I agreed to forego the knowledge of this experience, but they assured me I would get it back when I was older. So after that, I didn't think about this experience at all. I went through life. I had my nose broken. Another thing that happened I didn't mention was I had my left shoulder was broken and my right shoulder was dislocated. That was something that was planned out. And I had no memory of any of this planning. Some of the people I now realize I had planned events with, I didn't remember any of it. I just went through life. But then about 12 years ago, I was reading a Newsweek magazine article about this guy, Eben Alexander. He had a near-death experience, and he wrote about it. Anyway, I was reading about his experience, and something clicked, and I got all these memories back. I think about this stuff almost every day, and I have for like the last 12 years, just trying to sort it all out and understand what I experienced back then. So now I just try to share that experience when I can.
That Newsweek article that you just referenced, that one that kind of brought back your memories, there's something really interesting about that because that was a neurosurgeon.
Right.
And prior to him having his NDE, I believe he just, like many people say, and especially in the medical community, when people die, it's the potential DMT being
Right.
released in our brain, and it's not an actual near death experience. They're not going anywhere.
Yeah, he had been a total atheist. Yeah.
And then because he was in surgery, I believe when it happened, it was provable that he was brain dead during
Mhm.
his NDE. So he then understood, oh no, that wasn't just things going on in my brain. I was
Right.
somewhere else.
Yeah, and he had the data to show, hey, look, here's the thing. I'm brain dead. There's no he's a neurosurgeon. He understands it, and he's able to point out there's no way I had any brain activity during this time, and yet his soul had been going through all kinds of stuff. So yeah, and then he wasn't an atheist after that, and he's explained his story many, many times.
I almost feel like his story needed to happen, obviously, for you to have your memories come back, right? That's what kind of
Yeah,
evoked your
that
faith again,
triggered
you know?
somehow that triggered for me to get to have these memories come back to me.
Perhaps you two had some sort of agreement too, you know? Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I certainly don't remember that one if that was some kind of agreement.
Okay, well, I have a barrage of questions. Going back to a couple things that you said, time was different there, right? And when you're 6 years old, you have this breathing issue and you leave your body. What happened here on Earth when your brother and friends were playing, you had passed out. It probably wasn't a lot of time on Earth. Is that what I'm gathering? Because it was like a quick thing. They weren't like, oh my God, what's wrong with him? He's lying there dead. They didn't even really notice.
Right. I would guess it was about 30 seconds. I
Okay.
mean, the amount of time it would take an 8-year-old to be concerned about his younger sibling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what's interesting and confusing about that is that on the other side, you also said that over there, it seemed as though 2 years here was nothing, right?
Mhm.
So time
Yeah.
is different there. But it's almost like that's the reverse because when you left and you went there, who knows how long you were there? It was longer than 30 seconds Earth time, right?
Right.
But it was
Right.
quicker on Earth. But then if, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like inverse because then you're also saying that Earth time goes so quickly, right? Or no, no, time over there. I'm confusing myself now. Time over there goes so quickly, and like what 2 years on Earth feels like is quick there, but not
Right.
quick when you're living it.
Well, as souls, we're so much more intelligent than we are here as people. And so we can process information much more quickly and more completely. And so you could gain an entire library worth of knowledge in a couple seconds on that realm, whereas it would take like forever there.
Oh,
But then also there's just something different about time. Like it's almost like you're outside of time when you leave this physical realm. And it's really hard as a human. We're so trapped by time all that it's really hard to understand, but somehow uh, we like exist independent from time on the other side.
did you get the sense that you could reincarnate into any time period? Is it all happening, or is there linear time
Right.
on
Uh,
Earth?
that's a great question, and I don't really have a good answer to it. I think there is maybe some limited ability to, I don't know, maybe reincarnate in the past or something, but I don't really have a full understanding of it, except to say that, hey, it doesn't work the way we think it does. Time is more complicated, and the past, present, and future are tied together. The way I view it as for God, it's all one. It's all the same. Past, present, future is all one entity, and somehow God's able to balance all this different stuff out perfectly. But I can hardly wrap my mind around it.
Hmm. So many people say that time is different or time doesn't exist over there.
Right.
It's
Right.
there. It's interesting that there are these. Everyone has a unique experience with the
Mhm.
NDEs, but then there's also commonalities
Right.
of the experience. A lot of people mention the Akashic records.
Mhm.
It was that in any of the realms?
I guess I'm not familiar enough with them to answer that question.
Okay, apparently
I'm
it's
not.
just a record of everything that has ever happened.
Oh, right. Yeah. I feel like everything, down to a tiny little thought everybody has, every little ant, like everything they do, I feel like everything is recorded. Like there's no secrets, there's no mysteries. On the other side, here we have secrets and there's stuff we don't share, even thoughts that we don't share with other people. On the other side, that's all an open book. We don't have secrets. And that was pretty clear, especially with my parents. I was able to look into what kind of people they were in all kinds of detail because I needed to know that to know whether or not I would accept living as their child. But
Right.
but yeah, you're right. Everything is recorded. That was pretty clear.
Okay. Okay. Now, you were given all these possibilities of who to be reincarnated as and what planet. Do we have the possibility to be an animal or an insect?
Right. I think we do, but I also think that would be very rare. Like I don't think most souls would ever choose to go back to something so simple. Most souls are very focused on getting to higher levels and leaving behind Earth and going to a place where they can be just extremely happy. And so to take a side quest, so to speak, and go do something like be a dog, it would be kind of like a sacrifice of happiness in order to make that happen. But I think God respects our free will to a degree that people underestimate. And that if someone really wants to do that, I don't see why God would ever prevent them from doing that. Or maybe they want to play some specific role in some friend or some other soul's life. Like the dog could be a key component, or I heard something about a house fire where the dog wakes everybody up so
Yeah.
they're able to leave the fire. Like I think that stuff is planned sometimes, and I think it happens. But personally, I don't think that's normal or usual. I don't think that usually happens.
Okay. Yeah, my grandma's dog saved her life. Every day she would go outside and sit on her deck in her backyard. And one day her dog Jack came out and was just barking incessantly. And she was like, "What
Okay.
is it? What's wrong?" Made her go inside. And the second she went inside, a tree fell down right where she was sitting.
Well, yeah.
So it's like, maybe. But okay. So with regard to animals, so you answered a question that I had on Instagram. Do you think there's animals in heaven? And you said yes.
Right.
What's your understanding of that?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't mention this, but at one point during my experience, it was like I transitioned through what I think was a dog heaven. It was like I went
Really?
through, and a lot of kids describe this. Somehow, kids, when they have an experience like this, a lot of them experience the same thing, where it's like, in order to move up to some higher level, you have to first go through this, like a dog heaven. And there was all these like dog souls that were extremely happy, and they were all, I don't, somehow I knew they were really happy, but I moved through it so quickly. But yeah, I think there's animals at all kinds of different levels of heaven. I feel like they have their own level that they're at. And that in order for them to progress to higher levels, they need to come back and learn just like people do. But through repeated experiences, they grow to higher and higher levels. And eventually they won't need to come back here anymore.
Do you think that their levels are only in the animal realm? Like, are they a dog and then a pig and a cow, or like,
Right.
and why was there only an area for just dogs specifically?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Like, do dogs become cats, or do they become people, or do insects evolve into higher animals? I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised. The key here is free will, and that God lets souls make their own decisions and do what they want to do. So I wouldn't be surprised if any of that happens, where a lower level souls who wants to become a higher level souls is allowed to progress and make the choices necessary to make that happen.
So many people have said that they see their dogs that have passed on or pets,
Right.
there.
Yeah, what I saw was I didn't see any animals that passed away, but as part of my life planning, it was clear that there was two dogs that had like an important role in my life, or I had an important role in their life. That with two dogs in my life, that there was some kind of plan for that. Like that was really clear during my experience, also.
Okay. And so where does our decisions as a species, where we have decided we're at the top of the animal kingdom and we can kill these animals for food,
Right.
how does that play into all of this?
Well, I mentioned that God is loving, kind, compassionate, caring. I think that includes all life on the planet. And that for us to really reach our maximum potential, we need to recognize that animals are, that they're similar to us. They have wants and hopes, and they suffer when they're mistreated. And that we need to, not that we have to, but in order to move on to higher levels of consciousness, it's important to recognize that these animals deserve good treatment, and that we should be kind and compassionate with them and not mistreat them. I think if you're mistreating an animal, it shows that you're maybe at a mid-level soul. Like you're not a higher level soul, because as you get to a higher level, you recognize that, hey, these animals, they're like me. They have wants and hopes, and they get hungry or cold or hot or whatever, and that we should treat them well also.
So I'll ask a difficult question and in no judgment, but people who do have these NDEs, I don't think I've heard of one, even though they understand that animals are there, coming back and becoming vegan,
Right.
right?
Um,
So I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, no. Uh, yeah, that's a fair point. Maybe they just haven't reached that level of advancement. I don't know. For me personally, I've become a vegetarian. We were on the eastern shore of Virginia a couple years ago, and we were driving by this chicken truck, and they had all these chicken cages, and there was it must have been thousands of chickens and their feathers were falling out. They looked terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
They did not look happy. And I was like, okay, I don't really feel comfortable being part of that anymore. And that's me. That's, again, this is a very personal decision. Like, I don't feel comfortable being part of this anymore. And so I became a vegetarian after that. And I think humanity can and will do a lot better with these animals that we're just treating horribly, frankly. Personally, I don't think cows are treated that badly to get the milk. That's my judgment. I'm sure other people have another judgment, which is fine, but that's just where I've arrived.
I'll send you some things, Aaron.
Yeah, feel free. Feel free to
I'll
send
send you
this.
some videos.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I went through the same journey. I started as a vegetarian for most of my life. I was vegetarian and I thought dairy's fine. I thought they weren't being killed. I thought they weren't being mistreated. And I thought it was fine to be a vegetarian. And I think that's very noble in itself, is very noble to have that thought and make that choice. But then as I learned more, I didn't want to know it because I didn't want to give up the dairy. But once I knew it, I thought, "Ugh, now I can't unknow this. And I
Right.
have to act according to my beliefs." And I failed. I remember I was pregnant. I was 4 months pregnant and I was raw vegan into that. And then I just quit. I was out one day running errands and I passed by a pizza shop and I'm like, I'm starving. And I had the pizza and I went back to being vegetarian for a couple years.
Mhm.
And then finally, even knowing what was going on, and then finally made my way back to vegan. But I think it's awesome that you're vegetarian. And I think instances like that are key to kind of like wake us up. The thing that woke me up is that I was a child and I saw the movie Charlotte's Web, and
Yeah.
with Wilbur, and I got to love Wilbur as this pig character. And then that night, my dad was making ham. And so that's how it clicked for me. I put it together. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want
Right.
to eat Wilbur. So it's like things
Yeah.
like that, that it makes it click for people. Another animal activist who's really big in the UK and here, his name is Earthling Ed. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his experience was that he was eating KFC and fried chicken and he was on his way out like you, and he saw a truck that had chickens and it got in an accident and it tumbled and he
Okay.
saw all these dead chickens on the road and he was like, "Oh my gosh." That's when it clicked for him and that's when he became, I don't know if he did vegetarian to vegan or if he became vegan right away, but yes, just seeing it, it made it
Right.
click. But yeah, I don't know that everyone is here to be a vegan. I think it's probably a journey, and
Yeah.
it maybe in another life that they do that.
Right. And everyone's kind of got to make their own decisions. For me, it seems like a lot of the animals that are being eaten aren't treated well. They're not treated up to the standards that I would have to treat them. So I don't personally want to be a part of it.
Yeah, most people just don't wanna know. They don't wanna look at
Right.
it so that they can continue doing it, and my whole thing is look and watch and know, and if you
Oh
still
yeah.
want to, then that's your free will, right?
Yeah,
But
I
you
agree.
shouldn't be ignorant to what's happening.
Right.
Okay, let me look through my questions. I'll ask my top 1 or 2 left so I don't keep
Okay.
you too long. Did you have any understanding of Jesus when you were there? I know you had an encounter with the creator or God or whatever we want to call it, but then there's this other aspect of Christianity. And I don't know if you're religious or not or what your beliefs are, but it seems as though those who are Christian here, and if they have the NDE, they can have some sort of experience with Jesus.
Right.
But maybe if they're a different religion, they might have an experience with, say, like Buddha or I don't know. So, what happens in that regard for you?
Okay. For me, I didn't interact with Jesus or talk to Jesus, anything like that. But it did seem like there was someone being alluded to, like or a reference, and I got the impression that this was Jesus, and that Jesus plays a bigger role in all of this than people realize. Like it seems to me that Jesus is as a soul, like he's kind of in charge of the universe. Maybe God's in charge of everything, but
Okay.
God has delegated authority for this physical universe, maybe, and all the souls in it to Jesus. It definitely seems like Jesus is at a different level, not the same as everyone else, and that he's got a bigger importance and plays a much bigger role in how things work and how things are governed in the afterlife than people realize. That's kind of the way I take it, is that, yeah, he was a real person and really lived, and he plays a big role, but I didn't personally interact with Jesus or anything like that.
Okay. Okay. And You mentioned an experience with an angel and you said him. So there is a difference. You can understand male energy versus female energy over there.
Right. Yeah. I don't think souls that's a good question because it seemed to me like souls didn't really have a gender, but this particular being was definitely a male energy or there was something male about it.
Mhm.
So I can't quite resolve that. I don't understand the difference. I felt like I've been female before, in past lives, but generally speaking, I prefer to be a male. And why this one entity as a soul seemed masculine, I don't know. I'm not quite sure.
Okay. And you could also tell a difference between an angel versus like a soul that you had been, correct? There was definitely a difference between the two. And like our
I
spirit guides another third thing or what?
Right. I don't know. I wish I had a good answer to that. I don't know. Some of this was like a being of light that was obviously much more advanced than me, whether it was an angel or just a highly evolved soul like mine. If there's any difference, I don't know. I couldn't really answer that.
Okay. Yeah, because my question is, what are angels?
Right.
Were they once like us and they
Right.
fully ascended and then volunteer to be angels, or are they a separate thing from the beginning? Like, I guess we don't know.
Yeah, I don't really know.
Yeah. Okay. One last question, and it's a big one. Maybe controversial. It is controversial. You were told there's a couple that's going to have a baby. When did that embryo become a soul, a life?
Okay.
Was it immediately upon conception? Was it when it was born into the world or
Right. Okay. Well, I'll just share my experience, what I saw.
okay.
So my guides and I, we picked the genes for the body that I was going to become, and I was able to witness conception of that body. And from a spiritual perspective, it was very beautiful. Like there was a big spiritual significance to this event. And the egg was like a spiritual entity of itself, and the conception was it like fulfilled its purpose. So for the egg, it was very important and a big deal. So I got to witness that conception. It was a beautiful thing from a spiritual perspective. But I didn't fully merge with that body until right before birth. And so I guess I'm not sure what to tell you about abortion or a question like that. I would say, hey, it should be taken seriously. It's definitely not a like zero consequence type of a decision. Like it should be taken seriously, but I would not say it's like the worst thing ever or like you're destroying some soul by doing that. God's got a way for these souls. Whatever we do, the soul is going to be okay. They're going to have other opportunities. They're going to be able to do what they need to do to get the experiences they need. So it's not like it's the end of the world here. But I would say, hey, it should probably be taken seriously and not just as some trivial matter. I think the worst case is like if a person makes that choice, is maybe they need to experience that, what that's like from the spiritual side to go through that.
Mhm.
But the two big things for me, conception was very beautiful from what I saw, but then I didn't merge fully with this body until right before birth.
How do you know that's when you merged? What was that like?
It was like I was kind of monitoring the situation. It's like I was kind of loosely tied to the body before that, and I would just kind of roam around a little bit right before I was born. I knew I was going to be stuck in this body for a long time, so I was I was off having a good time. I was just kind of flying around. And,
Okay.
but there came a point where I had to fully merge with this body and lose all my memories and my knowledge. And I knew that. And the time I did that was like right before birth.
Wow. Okay. That is so I need to think on all of that,
Yeah.
that's new information for my mind to comprehend. Did you ever see the movie Heaven is Real with
Yeah.
Greg Kinnear? Okay.
Yeah.
So that boy, what was he, 7 years old, I think, when he had
Right.
his
Something like that.
NDE, and then so on the other side, he saw a girl, and she may have had red hair, if I'm remembering correctly, and she hugged him, and she was his sister, and when he came back, he told his parents, and his parents had never told him that they had a miscarriage, and they didn't know if it was a girl or a boy, but then they realized, oh,
Right.
it was a girl. So that's so much for me to wrap my head around because if that experience happened, but babies that are miscarried,
Mhm.
it's like they're orbiting, but their soul is not in the fetus yet.
Right.
But if they have a miscarriage, that whatever that is that's orbiting, that can then go to the other side and then they're still on their journey,
Right.
whether they come back again or okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my mind is thoroughly blown. Thank you so much, Aaron. I
Okay.
could I could go on, like I told you, I could probably go on forever, but I will be respectful of your time. Thank you so much for all of this information. You seem like a pretty private guy, but do you mind if people reach out to you? Do
Oh
you
yeah,
want them to? Or
yeah, people are welcome to reach out. I'm easy to find. My name is Aaron Thomas Green. I'm easy to find on Facebook. You can email me at aarongreen1975 at gmail.com or Instagram, green78401. Anyone who wants to talk to me or ask me a question, anything you want, that's fine. I don't mind if people reach out to me.
thank you so much. And yeah, you've been so generous with your information, with your time. You don't know me. I'm a stranger. And I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing this information with me and with the listeners. And I'm just so grateful to even have a platform where I can reach out to people like you, where I want to
Right.
hear more from you and just be able to bring that into the world. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to share. The only thing I'm really trying to accomplish here is to explain to people that yes, God is real. And that really, to get the most potential out of life, we need to become kind, compassionate, loving, honest, good people. Like it really matters. And that's what we should focus our attention on, is just trying to be better people.
Yes. Love it. Thanks. And you have a great day. And say
All right.
hello
Yeah.
to
Thank you.
to your family for me. And
All right.
please thank them on my behalf for taking up so much of your time today.
Okay. Yeah. No problem.
Okay. Bye bye. Take care.
All right.